part 2 of a video that I did about a year and a half ago where I showed you how to make your own conversion kit for about $20 to convert your gas-powered lawnmower over to propane power. In that original video, I showed you all the parts, I explained to you how it worked, and then I showed you that it worked on a lawnmower with a very simple carburetor. At the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can adapt those kits to lawnmowers with slightly more complicated carburetors, and that it still actually works just as good. Before I get started though, I'm going to address some comments that were made on the first video that some of y'all had, and I'm going to have a link to that original video either in this video or below in the comments, so that way you can go back and watch the first part of this. First of all, let's talk about the explosiveness of propane. Some people had some concerns about that. Well, propane actually has a higher flash point than gasoline, making it safer. Gasoline flash point is about 400 to 500 degrees, depending on the atmosphere and that sort of thing. Propane, on the other hand, has a flash point of 900 degrees, so you need a hotter spark, hotter temperature to get it going. But still, the good part about propane is that it actually allows you to start your mowers a little bit easier because it's in vapor form. It's easier to start the lawnmower. This other issue that came up was backfire. The way that the original kit was set up is run through the carburetor on the air intake side. And the question came up about, the tank's going to explode. Well, no, not really. Propane has to have the correct fuel to air mixture in order to be flammable at all. If you were to light a match inside a propane tank that was sealed, the propane would actually snuff out the flame. It would not explode, so that's not going to happen. It's only going to be flammable once that propane leaves the tank under pressure and in fact has the right fuel to air mixture. Just jetting the propane out of a nozzle and having a match nearby won't necessarily make it flammable there at the nozzle. It's probably going to be flammable at some time thereafter. Once the propane dissipates and gets the right fuel to air mixture, then it'll become flammable, and then you may have a jet of flame. But it's not going to explode the tank if you get a backfire through your carburetor. So you got to have the right fuel to air mixture. It's actually a lot safer. If you go on there to the internet and research it, there's lots of police patrol cars, fleet vehicles that are run on propane, and the propane tanks are a lot stronger. They're made out of steel. So them being ruptured isn't much of an issue compared to a plastic or thin metal gasoline tank. And if something does happen as far as the flammability, the propane has a tendency to flash the propane that's in the air, and then the jet of flame would be wherever that leak is coming from. It's not like gasoline that keeps pouring out on the ground and burning and burning and burning and spreading. So it's actually safer than gasoline. Another thing that's current to what's going on right now is up in the Northeast. They've just recently gone through Storm Sandy, that hurricane that came through there. And a lot of people have generators, but absolutely no gasoline to power those generators. It's kind of this reciprocal thing. You got to have gas to have power. You got to have power to get gas. A lot of the gas stations that are out of gasoline, well, what are you going to do? The ones that do have gasoline don't have any power to pump the gasoline. The good thing about propane is it's readily available. The United States makes 90% of the world's propane. Propane gas can be stored indefinitely, and it doesn't go bad. Unlike gasoline that you may have in a tank or in containers for emergency purposes, it's eventually going to go bad. It's not going to do you a bit of good, and it's going to make your engines run like crap. Propane tanks, you can buy, the 5, 10, 20, 100-pound, 200-pound propane tanks and stored indefinitely. So it works out really good for emergency preparedness, and the conversion that I do on the lawnmowers can be easily adapted to most of your gas-powered generators out there. But there are a lot of companies now that make propane-powered generators. So for emergency preparedness, it's a great thing to have. As a backup, you can actually run your generators off of both gas and propane. Coming up in just a second, I'm going to show you the hookups for this more complicated carburetor. I showed you a Briggs & Stratton 3.5 horsepower in the original video. This is I think a 6.5, almost 7 horsepower Troy-built lawnmower, but these engines are made for probably 90% of the lawnmowers that are out there. The cool thing about the propane is that it can bring life to an old motor. Certainly you can convert a brand new lawnmower to propane very easily, but for an engine that's got some wear on it, that has some carburetor adjustment problems, golly, you can bring your old mower almost back to new life by running propane. So let me break for just a minute, and we're going to take a look at this new mower and see how it's all hooked up. Okay, what we're going to do real quick is look at the fuel hookup for this more complicated carburetor. The original video was a carburetor that did not have a fuel bowl or a fuel jet. This is a Troy built, I think 6.5 horsepower. As you can see here, here's the propane tank with the fuel control here. The fuel hose runs down here, and if you look right there, there is a brass elbow, and that elbow connects to the back side of the air intake housing or air intake box. Your air still comes through your air filter, so you're not getting any crud in the carburetor, but that propane is injected behind it. There's a little baffle in there that directs your crankcase breather hose into the back of the carburetor for cleaner emissions. Well, what I did, I just disconnected the crankcase breather and fitted that brass elbow to where the breather used to go, into the filter. And on the opposite side over here, as I can turn it around, there is your fuel bowl. You know, here's your fuel primer bulb, here's your fuel bowl, and behind that is the fitting into the back of the air filter. If you try to run the propane through the fuel side of your carburetor into that fuel bowl, you don't get enough propane. The fuel jet for your gasoline is much too small. There's too many orifices and angles and little holes that the propane has to get through. So if you mount your propane on the air intake side of your carburetor, even a complicated carburetor, it's just going to work just fine. Otherwise, you're going to have to buy a $200 kit, what they call a zero pressure or on-demand propane regulator. And that's primarily the largest cost of those propane conversion kits out there. So that's something to consider. Just some brass elbows, some poly fittings, and some little worm gear clamps, and you're going to be ready to go on just about any gasoline lawnmower carburetor, or for this case, even a propane generator. Okay, this lawnmower is currently running at idle on propane. I'm going to try to show you that there's no gas in the tank. Hopefully you can see down in there. I mean, this dry as a bone. Nothing in there. It's only running on propane. I'll try to turn the RPMs up on it for you so you can see. Runs just fine. No gasoline, just propane. Turn it off now. And that's it. Works great. Hope it works out for you too.